The day my father cried at a dinner table, a man who had never once shed a tear at a funeral, at a hospital bed, or at any moment in his entire hard-hearted life, was the day my autistic brother slid a $2 million contract across the white tablecloth and said, quietly, without blinking, "You told me I would never amount to anything, Dad." And my father, this tall, proud, immovable wall of a man, crumbled. Right there, in front of the waiter, in front of strangers, in front of the son he had spent 19 years dismissing, doubting, and destroying piece by piece with every careless word he ever spoke. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because before the contract, before the tears, before the $2 million, there was a little boy in a blue hoodie, sitting alone at a school lunch table, tapping his fingers on the wood. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a father who looked at that boy and saw nothing worth saving. My name is Sophie. And this is the story of my brother Daniel, the boy the world called broken, who turned out to be the most extraordinary person in every room he ever quietly walked into. Daniel came into our lives 3 years after me, small and beautiful and immediately, unmistakably different. By age 4, the doctors had given it a name: autism spectrum disorder. My mother wept on the drive home. My father sat in the passenger seat with his jaw locked and his eyes straight ahead, and something in him shut down that day like a light going off in an empty house. From that moment on, my father looked at Daniel and saw only limitation. He saw a boy who didn't make eye contact, who couldn't bear to be touched by strangers, who wore the same blue hoodie every single day because anything else felt like sandpaper against his skin, who rocked back and forth at birthday parties while other children laughed and their parents pulled them gently away, as though difference was something you could catch. What my father never stopped long enough to see was what Daniel actually was. At 7 years old, Daniel had memorized the complete bus route system of our entire city. Every line, every stop, every departure time. He did this for fun, the way other kids memorized football scores. At 9, he taught himself 3 programming languages from books he borrowed from the library, not because a teacher assigned them, but because he said the logic was clean, and clean things made sense when the world outside his window rarely did. At 11, he could find a single error buried inside hundreds of lines of broken code faster than any adult in any room. But my father didn't see any of that. He saw report cards that said struggles socially. He saw a teenager who ate lunch alone. He saw a son who embarrassed him. And so the verdict was issued, again and again, in the small, brutal currency of daily words. Stop wasting time on those computer things, Daniel. You can't even hold a conversation. How do you expect to survive in the real world? And the one that I will carry in my chest like a shard of glass until my last day on this earth, spoken at the dinner table in front of all of us. While Daniel sat right there, that boy will never amount to anything. He is useless, just accept it. Daniel didn't cry, he didn't argue, he just looked down at the table and tapped his fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, I was 16 years old. And in that moment I felt a rage so clean and so cold it could have cut through stone. I wanted to stand up and overturn that table. I wanted to scream every word that Daniel would never waste on ears that refused to hear. Instead, I reached under the table and found Daniel's hand, and I held it. Hard, he let me. Which was not something he always did. Years moved the way years do when a house is unhappy, slowly and with weight. Daniel disappeared into his bedroom most evenings after school. His door closed, his second-hand laptop open, the quiet tap of a keyboard the only sound. My father called it hiding. My mother said nothing, because she had spent so long following my father's lead that she had forgotten how to find her own voice. And that silence was its own slow kind of cruelty. At 17, something happened that should have changed everything. Daniel had been competing secretly without telling a soul in an international cybersecurity competition. Not just competing. Advancing, round after round, eliminating university students, professionals, engineers with decades of experience. His username was a string of numbers nobody would ever trace back to a quiet boy in a blue hoodie in a suburban bedroom. I found out by accident, reading over his shoulder one evening. My eyes landed on the leaderboard. His username, 3rd place, global. I grabbed his arm so hard he flinched. "Daniel," I whispered. "Daniel, do you understand what this is?" He turned and looked at me with those steady dark eyes. Yes, Sophie, he said. I've understood for a while. I ran to my father, dragged him to the screen. Stood there with my heart slamming against my ribs, certain, absolutely certain, that this was the moment. The moment the wall cracked. The moment my father finally looked at his son and saw him. My father stared at the screen for a long time. Then he said, "Those competitions don't mean anything. Real life is different." He walked out of the room. I stood in that doorway and felt something collapse inside me. Not hope. I had been losing hope for years. Something older, something more like faith. Daniel was already turned back to his screen. "I'm going to help you show them," I said to the back of his head. "I don't need to show anyone anything, Sophie," he said. "I just need to keep going." He left for university at 19. A full scholarship, one of 3 offers he received, all of which he had applied for alone, in secret, with a portfolio that a 30-year-old professional would have been proud to submit. He chose the school furthest from home. My father's goodbye at the door was 4 words. "Don't embarrass yourself there." Daniel nodded once, picked up his bag, and left. I held it together until his taxi turned the corner. Then I went to my room and I cried for a long time, not for Daniel. Daniel was going to be fine. I cried for my father, who was sending away his greatest gift and didn't even know it. I cried for all the years Daniel had sat at that table, being told he was nothing, and had simply chosen, with a dignity I still don't fully understand, to keep going anyway. 3 years passed. Then one Saturday my phone rang, Daniel's name on the screen. My brother never called unless there was something worth saying. "Sophie, Sunday dinner, bring Mom and Dad." "What's happening?" A pause. And then those 3 words, the first words of an old private language between us. Something worth saying. We walked into that restaurant on Sunday evening, a place in the city where the tablecloths were white linen and the menus had no prices. Daniel was already seated. Button-down shirt, calm hands, those same quiet eyes that had watched our father dismiss him for 19 years without ever once going dull. He stood when we came in, shook my father's hand. My father looked momentarily thrown, as though he had been expecting something lesser and didn't know how to recalibrate. We sat. We ordered. For a little while it was just a meal. And then Daniel reached into his bag. He placed a document on the table, slid it gently across the white cloth toward my father. It was an official offer letter, headed paper. Gold-embossed logo at the top. A logo that every person at that table, every person on that street, every person reading the news that morning would have recognized immediately. One of the most powerful technology companies in the world. A company so woven into the fabric of daily life that most people couldn't go a single hour without touching something it had made. Their artificial intelligence research division. For 2 years, their best scientists had been following a series of anonymous breakthroughs published quietly in a technical forum. Papers that were reshaping the boundaries of machine learning. Ideas so precise, so elegant, so far ahead of the field that other researchers had spent months simply trying to understand them before they could build on them. The company had spent 18 months and considerable resources tracing the source of those papers. The source was a 22-year-old in a university dorm room. The source was the boy my father had called useless at the dinner table. The offer was for a senior position in their AI research division. Relocation, full research autonomy. A team of 30 to lead. The compensation, salary, signing bonus, equity, totaled just over $2 million in year 1. My mother made a sound I had never heard from her before. A small, broken sound, like something long held tight finally giving way. My father stared at the paper. He didn't pick it up. He just stared at it, and the color in his face changed in stages, like a sky before a storm. Daniel waited. He was patient the way he had always been patient. He had been waiting his whole life for this moment, and he was going to let it arrive at its own pace. When my father finally looked up, his eyes were wet, and Daniel spoke, not loudly. Not with anger, not with the triumph that God knows he had earned. Just with the quiet, immovable weight of a truth that had always been true, spoken aloud at last. "You told me I would never amount to anything, Dad. I want you to hear that I didn't keep going because of those words. I kept going in spite of them. Every single day that you made me feel invisible, I went back to my room and I worked. Not to prove you wrong, just because the work was worth doing." His voice didn't waver, not once. "But I need you to hear this today. Not for me. For every child sitting at a table somewhere right now, being told by someone they love that they are nothing. That is the person I'm talking to. My father pressed his hand over his mouth. His shoulders shook. When he finally found his voice, it was barely a voice at all. Daniel, I am so sorry. I am so deeply, deeply sorry. I was wrong. I was so completely wrong about everything, about you. The words fell apart in his mouth. He was crying now, fully, openly, without any pretense or pride left to protect. And it was one of the most painful and necessary things I have ever witnessed. Daniel looked at his father for a long, steady moment. I know you are, he said. And I forgive you, not because it didn't hurt, it did. It hurt for years, but I've carried that long enough. And I think you have too. My mother reached across the table and took Daniel's hand, and he let her, and she wept quietly into the white tablecloth while the city moved around us outside the windows. Entirely unaware that something enormous had just happened at a corner table, in a restaurant, with no prices on the menu. I think about Daniel's fingers on the dinner table sometimes. 1, 2, 3, 4. I used to think he was shutting the world out. Now I understand he was counting himself back to steady. Back to the work, back to the only thing that had ever been fully and completely his. The world will always have people who look at someone different and see deficiency, who hear silence and call it emptiness, who see a child who doesn't fit the mold and decide with breathtaking arrogance that the child is the problem, but different is not broken. Quiet is not small. And the person in the corner, tapping their fingers, staring at nothing, wearing the same hoodie for the 10th day in a row, might be the one who is, right now, in complete secret. Rewriting the future. My brother never needed my father's belief to be extraordinary. He only needed the chance to keep going. He took that chance himself, every single day, for years, alone. And in the end, as it always does, in ways the world never sees coming, his hidden worth found its way to the light. It always does. It always, always does.